The MacBook Air is far from the most powerful laptop that Apple makes. However, it's still quite the compelling upgrade for current MacBook Air owners, and it's probably the laptop that most Mac users should buy. Check out our full video. Thanks for watching 9 to 5 Mac. Be sure to thumbs up, click the subscribe button, and then enable notifications with the bell icon so you won't miss any upcoming videos. 9 to 5 Mac on YouTube is sponsored by Hyper, maker of some of our favorite high-quality MacBook USB hubs, chargers, and more. For a limited time, get 25% off Hyper's new Hyperdrive USB-C hub for MacBook using the links below. This handy little USB-C attachment connects directly to your MacBook charger, giving you 2 USB 3.0 Type A ports in the process. Special thanks to Hyper for sponsoring 9 to 5 Mac on YouTube. So let's get to the unboxing. Inside the MacBook Air packaging, you have your Designed by Apple in California packet, of course. And inside that packet, you're going to find a getting started guide for the MacBook Air. Shows you how to use it, shows you how to use Touch ID as well, which is a brand new feature for the MacBook Air, made possible by that new Apple T2 security chip. And there's regulatory info and Apple stickers. These stickers will be different colors based on the Mac model you purchase, either gold, silver, or space gray. Also inside, you'll find a 30-watt power supply. So this is a USB Type-C power adapter. And of course, you also have a USB Type-C cable in the box as well to connect to that power adapter. All right, so let's go ahead and unwrap the MacBook Air. As you can see, design-wise, it's like an infusion of the 12-inch MacBook, of the MacBook Pro, and the MacBook Air. It's elements of all three of those all in one. And here you go. This is the 2018 MacBook Air. Obviously a very simplified design when it comes to ports, the rear hinge, the Apple logo, and everything is more compact. It's thinner, it's lighter, it has less width, has less depth. It's more portable than the MacBook Air of old. But when you compare it to the current generation MacBook Pro, that's when things get kind of interesting. Yes, it is definitely lighter than the MacBook Pro. However, it's actually thicker than the current generation MacBook Pro, and it has the same width and depth as the current generation MacBook Pro, and that's more of a testament to the MacBook Pro's design than anything else. But the MacBook Air does have that tapered design where it's thicker in the back, thinner in the front, and not only is that an iconic MacBook Air design, but it also pays dividends as far as weight is concerned. This thing is lighter than any laptop Apple sells outside of the 12-inch MacBook. So what's the biggest feature of the MacBook Air? Well, I don't have to tell you that. You guys know it already. It is, of course, the Retina display. Finally, a 13.3-inch Retina display on the MacBook Air. Fun fact, this is actually the last product in Apple's entire lineup with the screen to be updated to a Retina display. And as you can see, it looks gorgeous. But it's not just the Retina display. You now get edge-to-edge glass, no more ugly aluminum bezel that looks super outdated and cramped. Now you get those slimmer bezels, and it makes a huge difference. And you'll also notice way better viewing angles, which is something I hated about the old MacBook Air. Way better viewing angles, and you also get nearly 50% more colors. So the screen is just a massive upgrade all the way around. Better colors, much better viewing angles, obviously sharper text, and slimmer bezels with a more modern design. This, folks, is the reason that you want to upgrade from your MacBook Air to the new MacBook Air. Now let's talk about price for a second, because for a while now, the MacBook Air has been the entry-level laptop in Apple's lineup, and that still rings true because Apple still sells the previous generation starting at $1,000. Of course, you can upgrade that. The 2018 MacBook Air starts at $200 more at $1,200, and you can upgrade that as well, going up to as high as $2,600 when fully configured. But what's really interesting is that Apple still sells the entry-level last generation MacBook Pro, and that starts at $100 more than the MacBook Air at $1,300. And of course, you can configure that and max that out to, yep, $2,600. So it's really kind of interesting because you kind of have a decision to make here. Should I go with the MacBook Air or should I go with last generation's entry-level MacBook Pro for $100 more? We'll discuss that a little bit more later, but right now let's talk about some of the advantages of the MacBook Air. More battery life. It's not a bigger battery than the MacBook Pro, but it has the best battery life of any laptop in Apple's entire lineup. Yes, the best. You can see right here, the MacBook Air with Retina display has 13 hours of iTunes movie playback and 12 hours of wireless web browsing. How does it do it? Well, instead of a 15-watt CPU like in the previous MacBook Air, the new MacBook Air uses a 7-watt CPU, which really sips power. So this 1.6 GHz dual-core CPU is the only CPU configuration option available in the MacBook Air, mind you, is decent. Here's the benchmarks for Geekbench 4. You can see it still is behind that 2017 MacBook Pro. And you may say, well, obviously, Jeff, it's a Pro versus an Air. But remember that Pro is just $100 more when comparing the base configuration of the MacBook Air. Now, it really all depends on what you're doing. If you're word processing, if you're editing documents, you're browsing the web, the MacBook Air is going to be perfect for you. However, when you start to get into more intense workloads, such as Final Cut Pro 10, that is where the MacBook Pro, last year's model without the touch bar, which is only $100 more, really begins to flex on the MacBook Air. Now, I also compared the PCIe-based SSDs inside these two machines, and the MacBook Air is a little bit slower than the MacBook Pro in both write and read speeds, but keep in mind that if you have higher capacity SSDs, write speeds will be much improved. Now, one thing that the MacBook Air has going for it over the 2017 MacBook Pro is the 3rd generation butterfly switch keyboard, which is much improved over the 1st generation and 2nd generation. Still not my favorite keyboard, but it is definitely an improvement over prior generations. You also get individually backlit keys, which is nice. It's not going to change the way that you use your computer in the dark, but it does have a more premium look over the backlit keys on the previous generation MacBook Air. Now, you also get, for the very first time in a MacBook Air, a Force Touch trackpad. Now, this trackpad is 20% larger than the previous generation Air, although it's not as large as the trackpad in the MacBook Pro. However, you get all the gestures that you would expect, and you get the ability to click anywhere on the trackpad and get a uniformed response. So it's going to feel the same no matter where you click. Apple makes the best trackpads in the game. And here's the real biggie. This is the advantage that this machine has over all laptops in Apple's entire product lineup, because you get standalone Touch ID, no need for that stupid touch bar that is useless in my opinion. You get a standalone Touch ID sensor that allows you to authenticate, to purchase apps, to unlock your machine. It really is great. And like the Mac Mini, these security enhancements are made possible by the Apple T2 security chip embedded inside. And not only does it allow for Touch ID, but it also handles things like secure boot, encryption, and more. And you still get a FaceTime HD camera like you did on the previous generation MacBook Air, and yes, it is still 720p. At least Apple didn't regress and give you a 480p camera like they did on the 12-inch MacBook, so I guess we should be thankful. Sound has never been great on the MacBook Air, but the speakers are improved on the new model. They're 25% louder and feature a wider soundstage. So while it won't knock your socks off, it definitely is an improvement over the previous MacBook Air for sure. And instead of just 2 microphones, now there's 3 microphones on the new MacBook Air, and that allows for better FaceTime call quality, and that extra microphone helps out with hands-free Hey Siri as well. Now, one of the things that you'll instantly notice when you unbox your MacBook Air is that you lose a lot of the I/O from the previous generation model, including those 2 USB-A ports, the SD card slot, and MagSafe. Now you just get 2 USB-C ports with Thunderbolt 3. And not everyone is going to like this. I mean, you still have your 3.5mm headphone jack on the opposite side, but that's it. There are no USB-A ports, there's no MagSafe, there's no SD card slot, and that's going to be a bummer for a lot of people. However, those 2 USB-C Thunderbolt 3 ports are a big deal. Number one, you can use either one to charge your MacBook Pro, and they work with a ton of accessories like 10 gigabit Ethernet or docks, or super fast SSDs, or eGPUs. In a lot of circumstances, all you need is just one cable and you have a whole desktop computing solution. You have an eGPU, you have a display, and you're good to go. A single Thunderbolt 3 cable, you plug it in, it's charging your MacBook Air, and it's feeding that display, and it's pulling power from that external GPU. So let me show you how it works. So you just plug in that single Thunderbolt 3 cable, you can see the eGPU fire up in the background, and you also will see the display come on here in just a second as well. So that is super powerful because it's charging the MacBook Air, you have better graphics thanks to that external GPU, and you're connected to a 5K display, all with a single cable. So there are some trade-offs there to be sure, but Thunderbolt 3 should not be underestimated. The usefulness of it can make this slim and light portable machine and turn it to a desktop computer, albeit a very limited one with the CPU that's in this thing. But if you can work within the limitations of the somewhat anemic CPU that's in the MacBook Air, I think you'll like this machine a lot. And for a lot of people, it's going to be plenty. For those doing word processing, web browsing, and even light video editing, the MacBook Air is without a doubt the Apple machine for the mainstream. Let me know what you think in the comments. This is Jeff with the 9 to 5 Mac. 9 to 5 Mac on YouTube is sponsored by Hyper, maker of some of our favorite high-quality MacBook USB hubs, chargers, and more, like the HyperJuice 87-watt dual USB-C charger with Quick Charge 3.0 USB-A, so that you can recharge multiple devices from a single outlet at the same time. The HyperJuice USB-C charger is also available for 25% off for a limited time. Special thanks to Hyper for sponsoring 9 to 5 Mac on YouTube.